Hey guys, your boy VaulSC here. Hope you're doing well. We're going to have a look at a battle report between YuJing and PanOceania. That classic matchup, the classic clash of original true factions, and perhaps a foreshadowing because there's this Code 1 box coming out soon, which is going to have the Pano and YuJing facing off. Probably not a foreshadowing, but sounded cool, so there you have it. This mission, this bat rep will be on the mission Armory. That's the one where you've got to control that room, mostly at the end of the game, and I'll talk more about the mission soon. But first of all, some opening remarks about the bat rep we're going to go through today. This was an enjoyable game. It was an interesting game. There was a lot of fun had. There was a lot of luck, dice going back and forward. One important thing I want to sort of say about this game before going into it is that over the last year I have experienced a freakishly high number of games that have just really been decided by dice, and it's kind of made me the bitter and salty YouTuber that I am in 2020. But this was not one of those games. You'll see that the luck does go back and forward a lot, but ultimately the game, not decided, purely by some really freakish dice rolls, which was good. But that's not going to stop me from commentating about luck and variance and the outcomes and statistics, probabilities the entire way through, and what that means. So strap in for a big dosage of that. I will be talking about my army list, which is going to be very similar to the list which I discussed in the most recent Let's Build Some Lists video, and it'll be up against my buddy Isaac, aka Hexer, on the forums and Discord. Very classic opponent from this channel. So let's dive into some of this. I'll just quickly bring up the thing about the mission real quick. So this is our outdoorsy table. I seem to have been making a lot of very open tables of late, just because I feel very comfortable with playing on closed ones, and I sort of wanted to practice the open ones, and that seems to have been going on for years now. But we tried to clutter it up some. Bear in mind the middle objective room is for some reason infinitely high, and that actually blocks off a lot of line of sight since it's smack bang in the middle. We decided to make things a bit more difficult with this forest here, just because this raised area of terrain here really makes it a bit easier for you to shoot into your deployment zone from that angle or this angle over here. So with a lot of open area through here, we tried to block things off with these double storied crates in the forest and so forth, but you'll see a better view of the table as we go through the bat rep. Now, you do get 1 point from this objective room at the end of every game round, but that's peanuts compared to the 4-point swing in the final game round. And bear in mind that you get a point from ending turn 3 and ending the game, which is also the turn 3, so really it is a 5-point swing at the end. Yes, there's points for getting more stuff out of the panoplies. Yes, there's a classified, but honestly, it's really just about, who is in there with the most points worth of models at the end, which usually means it's going to be better for the player going second. Having said that, I still like this mission, or at least I hate it less than a lot of the other missions in the current ITS. If you took me back 3 or 4 years, I would have said, no, Armory, worst mission. But now, it's, by comparison, it's still a bad mission. But compared to some of the real doozies that are in the pack these days, unfortunately, players like me have to settle for this. And part of the reason why I tolerate it is that you've got an entire game to decide it. There's not too much else going on around the map, and if you really have crushed your opponent in terms of attrition, they're not going to have enough orders and enough firepower to dislodge you from that middle room. Also, you have the option of hacking your way into the first door and still forcing your opponent to waste a fair bit of time coming into it. Still, at the end of the day, this is a mission that is great for jammers, which I hate. It's great for factions that are very good at stalling and conserving points, especially in a lot of Marcus State, and then just surging in there and smoke grenades, eclipse grenades, just making a mockery of the stuff your opponents put in there. So yeah, not my fave, but we'll talk more about the implications of the mission and the rules during the game itself, as always. Next up, we're going to go to the lists. Here we are here. So the main point of difference with this list and the one that I sort of advertised in my Let's Build Some Lists video is that I've downgraded the HMG Hacktow to a Dao Fei, and that has allowed me to drop the Palbot Yao Zhao helper bot that belonged to either my Monstruck or Doctor, and use that 15 points saved to purchase a basic Krakot, which is still one of the better profiles in the game. So just to explain my thinking about this, The Dao Fei is a unit which really kind of intrigues me, specifically for this one basic HMG profile. And what I've been thinking about a lot lately is that with Physical 14, you can attempt to infiltrate onto your opponent's side of the table. And usually that kind of thing's very risky, but if you fail and he has to be deployed back in your deployment zone, you've still got a heavy infantry model with 4 speed and an HMG in your deployment zone, so it's still going to have a big impact on the game, and you're still going to be able to get your points worth out of him. But for those games where you deploy him on their side of the table, well, you've really maximized his potential. But you can have him on top of a building close to the deployment zone. You might have him right on the flank, able to shoot right down the long sort of row of units hid behind crates in their deployment area. There are a few things you can really do there, and you can access parts of the table you otherwise wouldn't have. So it's a really interesting change there. In terms of firepower, clearly, obviously not as good as a Hacktow. He is -1 ballistic skill, slightly less armor, doesn't have the TO camo, but for all intents and purposes, he will defeat the majority of the things that the Hacktow is going to defeat, and he will be defeated by the same things that the Hacktow is going to be defeated by, and you save a ton of points on him. So for those reasons, I think that I'd rather be playing the Dao Fei at the moment. If you want to know more about this list, do go watch that video that I posted recently. The Crackot Renegade, as always, just a wonderful profile for all of the reasons I've mentioned in many videos past, but generally what you've got is a really well-rounded, robust, flexible list, and it's been a while since I played something like this and reached out to YuJing. My opponent's list, probably even more interesting. This is a young man who likes to run Joan of Arc all the time, likes to run as many tags as possible. We've seen his list, which has 2 tags in it, very, really cool list. This is a bit of a different take on that. He's dispensed with the 2 tags, and he's downgraded to the Tek Balang, but he's picked up a couple of knights. One reason for the Tek Balang being there is that he knows this is an army mission, and we're going to be witnessing the power of the tag that can actually climb up a building that has an infinitely high walls, which is a bit controversial, and we'll talk a bit more about why that's annoying later in the game. But for now, that's sort of why he's there. The Knight of the Holy Sepulchre, or Sepulture, or whatever you want to call him, I've always dismissed this guy as not really being worth it. But if you're gonna take him, this is the context in which, it's kind of cool. You certainly don't mind having an additional Spitfire in this kind of list. He works really well with Joan's free coordinated order. The list certainly doesn't mind having an extra specialist in there. Definitely good for getting in the door. And he can pose as an innocuous warcore as he does in this game. And you'd never guess that that's actually a real knight unless you'd played this list a few times before, or if you're really paying a lot of attention, counting up the points in your head. So we'll see how it goes. The Magister Knight, love the Magister Knight. When you guys were watching me play Pano back in the day, you saw me take the Magister Knight all of the time. Really wonderful midfield disruption unit, which definitely packs more of a punch than you pay for him. He's wonderful in Joan's coordinated orders because of his Panzerfaust. And it's just amazing to have his cheap dispensable presence out there. Very good at defending, and you lose very little once they finally take him down. Kendrat is a really interesting choice. I was talking to him before the game, and we were discussing the fact that we both agree that Kendrat is a really interesting choice for Ikari and Morats right now for the duo option with the Red Fury Krakot. And that's specifically something I'm going to be playing a little bit in some of my Morat lists. He's got that idea for his Ikari. But Kendrat by herself in here, again, I see how she's kind of handy for Joan of Arc using coordinated orders. I like her a little bit less because you've got the wonderful Magister Knight in there already doing basically the same kind of role that she does. So you've already sort of spent that points bracket on that kind of model. And when Kendrat's going out by herself, sometimes what's going to happen is you're going to spend too many orders on her at the expense of not really getting the most out of your tag and Joan herself, and not ending up killing enough stuff because she gets worn down by arrows or misses her target somehow. Zulu Cobra Sensor and Auto Include Must, way too powerful, broken, please nerf. Monstrucker, too good not to take. Hellop Militiaman, too good not to take, especially with Joan. Tech B, an obvious choice. Fugazi John Bot, an obvious choice. One thing I will say about the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre, for those of you who think, oh, this looks cool, I'm going to copy this list, one thing that you should bear in mind is that if you are going to be running this exact list, the Knight is pretending to be a war core. Everybody's expecting a war core in Jones' list, and by pulling off that big deception, well, you're just running a list that doesn't have the Walker in it. Like, you're missing out on the opportunity to take a 3-point order Warcore, which can pop his head over the parapet and defend himself. Personally, I'd rather just take the Warcore, even though it's more obvious. It just results in a better list, in my view. But, look, we'll see how all of that goes. Alright, time now to get into the bat rep itself, and we'll talk more about the how the mission goes and the lists and everything I want to discuss on a case-by-case basis as we work our way through. So really importantly, my opponent wins the dice roll for Lieutenant, chooses the table side that we'll see on the left over here. So this is where Pano is going to be setting up, and of course I'm on this side with the trusty YuJing. Now that gives me the choice of first turn or second turn. If this was a tournament situation where it's the final table and all I've got to do is beat one guy either with a marginal victory or a major victory and that will secure first place in the tournament, I would always, always, always take second turn here because I'm confident in my ability to defend, and we are up against Pano as opposed to Combined Army or Hakislam. And I know from playing against Pano a lot, there's a lot you can do to hide from them. There's a lot you can do to sort of just shrink into the shadows and avoid the stuff that's just going to break your back at turn 1. Having said that, I opted to go first turn for this game, which I do feel overall is a mistake, but it's a deliberate mistake just because I want to practice first turn situations more. I want to try and see what I can achieve with the Daofei and test that theory of potentially infiltrating him. I ended up not infiltrating him, but that's beside the point. So I felt like I could learn more from going first, and definitely would make for a more interesting experience going first here. But if it was purely about winning, I definitely think that I would have opted for second no matter what. And you guys have seen that play out in many of my other bat reps. So that means I'm deploying first. Let's have a look at what that looks like. So right-hand side of the deployment, you've got the Celestial Guard with control device. Really here to be able to poke down the stairway and fire a smoke grenade launcher out and towards the middle if needs be, towards the center of the room and spots where the Rushi can move through to and make use of that. I've got 3 Impetuous models going up the right-hand flank, the Shaolin to put the smoke in first, plus the 2 Guangxi. TR bot way back here, and of course Rushi through the middle, but we'll look at that more closely in the next image. So here we are. A Monstrucker is just stuck between the two of them because he may need to go and revive the Rushi or the bot, and that's one of the benefits of having this kind of synergized setup where you've got a guy who can cater to either of the bots. You've also got the Lieutenant here who's a hacker who can easily put assisted fire on the Rushi or use the Rushi's repeater to put assisted fire on the TR bot. Again, a really synergistic situation. There's not much synergy in infiNity Army lists, but when you can have synergy, you should try and go for it. We've got the Guilang out here. There is an exclusion zone, mind you, so I can't really go further beyond that. But if the Guilang can move forward and put down a repeater, that's going to help against Pano. And I do have a hacker that can use the repeater here. This camera marker is the Liberto's mine on ground level. Speaking of the Liberto, if we move up to the left-hand flank, you've got the Liberto himself over here with a Krakot next to it. Note that they're both camping on this this doorway, this entrance here over the walkway, because we are worried about enemy stuff like a NIS HMG or in this case Kendrat or anything that might try to use this advantageous position to shoot into my deployment zone. We really don't want that. Couple more Guangxi down the bottom, and then the Flash Pulse bot on the left-hand side, and a Doctor over here, just because I strongly suspect that if the Daofei is going to be in my deployment zone, it's more likely to be on this side rather than the other side, so she's preparing to be able to move over and revive him. Note that she could also help the Krakot out, but the Daofei might end up being in this spot here at some point in the game, so that's why she's just hanging out where she is. Extreme left-hand flank, you can see the HVT bottom corner here, but this area is, very roughly defended by the Flash Pulse bot, the Guangxi, and maybe the Rushi, although the Rushi is not a very good ARO piece, as we know. Okay, my opponent, this is his right-hand flank, which is standing opposite to my Flash Pulse bot and the building containing the Krakot and the Liberto. So this miniature here is representing Kendrat. We have the flash pulse spot right over here. There is a tech B, just carefully watching this angle here, but prone. I was thinking of actually dropping my YuJing here, but that didn't end up happening. I had to choose somewhere else. Joan of Arc herself is standing, and when you're confident with your Joan of Arc usage, definitely worth using her as an ARO piece because she's so tough. The double action round from the multi-rifle sometimes pays off. She's good at ballistic skill and quite good at just dodging behind cover, so you want to sort of take advantage of her resilience, really. There's a Monstrucker on top of this building, and there's a Magister Knight over here. As I was watching him deploy everything, I actually thought that he had a cutter because there was so much points like not visible. But of course, he fooled me into thinking that he had a Warcore, when in fact there was a very expensive Knight taking the Warcore's place. So there's Joan there, as we just pointed out, Monstrucker in front of her, and the Tech B up on top of the building. Tech B could be a useful specialist later. And Magister Knights nearby to them. There are 3 miniatures out here in a row which represent the Helot decoys, and the real one is in fact this one here. So that's the real Helot. Of course, the Jammer on this side of the table, and then the Warcore, who's actually a Knight using Holy Projector level 1. A closer view of the Helots. My Reserve Trooper, after looking at really carefully, I was thinking about trying to infiltrate the Daofei over to Joan's side of the table and putting him on that building and standing up and shooting, and ultimately I decided not to. And the reason why is that I felt like his positioning of Joan was pretty good. If the Daofei shoots at Joan, I'm not going to do 3 wounds to her. She's going to be able to fall back behind the wall. At most, I'll be able to, waste a bunch of orders pulling around and getting into a firefight with the Magister Knight, which I could even lose if he gets lucky with his Panzerfaust. I'll be taking on the Helots from a certain distance, but, possibly not if I got the wrong one. And then if I went down the stairs at all, Kendrat could actually potentially get me there. So I thought, well, the Daofei is going to come back here instead. I'm not going to risk it. He can actually man this position. I'll try and rely on the YuJing for a bit more damage, and use the first turn to move forward with, getting the impetuous people into position, whatever opportunities I can take. Another thing about this is that if the Daofei fails the infiltration roll, I don't believe you can just place him in the deployment zone. He's got to be a non-camo marker on the side of the table, and I was also worried that he had a cutter. Like, I'd be coming out of a camo state, shooting at things, and then receiving the arrow from a cutter. Just didn't feel comfortable. But, of course, it's not a cutter, it's a Tikbalang. So Tikbalang very carefully positioning himself around here, and he had a couple of options, either covering the left-hand flank or here, where the silhouette is right now, which does cover the building where the Daofei would have been walking out to. And this is important because Daofei against this Tikbalang long range, with the Tikbalang having room to push back a little bit, doesn't really favor the Daofei. Not a lot can be achieved for a while, and this tag is in a great defensive spot shooting over that way. And of course he's going to be able to use the bridge area to move towards my lines with Climbing Plus, so pretty good deployment for the tag. There's a better photo of what he can see. As you can tell, the Daofei is positioned on this building over here. This objective room, mind you, is infinitely high, so once we come around through that angle over the walkway to shoot through, let's say, the Magister Knight, the tag's watching all of that with the silhouette being here and having the line of sight all through that angle, if you guys can picture that. Alright, so my first turn, 9 orders group 1 plus irregular for Liberto, then 4 in group 2 plus the 3 irregulars with the YuJing joining group 2 later. My opponent spends a command token to strip 2 orders from group 1, and then the impetuous troopers move out. We're putting a smoke grenade on the right hand flank to protect things, so I do have the option of running up that side later. On the left hand side, something similar happens. We're moving out with impetuous troops towards the position of the Armory with 1 Quan Chi around the back. My lieutenant is revealing temporarily to put up controlled jump and not going back into camo state initially, and the reason why is that when you suspect your opponent doesn't really have anything that can easily kill your lieutenant, you don't necessarily have to put him back in marker state. You could actually use his second lieutenant order to put up a different piece of support wear after you've used your drop trooper. So I'm leaving him in model state for now because he could actually put assisted fire on the TR bot or the Rushi if some sort of opportunity arises. That's when we go for the landing with the YuJing. I've found a nice little spot here where the the Tech Bee is tucked away, can't flash pulse me. I'm in the back arc of his robot here. If I'm lucky, I'll even blow him up with the explosion level X. After the bot has been wrecked, I can then move past and shoot Kendrat in the back, probably rendering her dogged with my multi-rifle, and then she dies at the end of the turn. And if that's the only thing that this model achieves, then my opponent will be down 2 orders for the entire game, having to remind, he's got a very small list, so only 8 orders plus the lieutenant order for the rest of the game. That will help me significantly. And if the Lushi is just ending the turn, the YuJing, if it ends the turn behind this green stack of containers, then my opponent will have to come after it and, you know, waste the turn just effectively trying to kill him. So I felt like this was a really good move to make. Worst case scenario though, it fails to roll and scatters over in front of Kendra and takes like a Vulcan shotgun or something like that, or gets shot by Joan. But there are a lot of positions where it can land that it won't actually die, and having that additional wound is very, very forgiving. With control jump and with my opponent having no hackers, I think he succeeds on a 16. However, this time around rolls a 20 and fails and scatters directly off the table, so in fact doesn't land here. I've been a bit unlucky with this kind of thing, and I definitely think this is a situation where it's low risk, high reward. Right, the discussion I just outlined there, I can win the game without this model, but my opponent's going to really struggle to win the game if I get 2 or 3 kills and have a model in his deployment zone he has to deal with. That really puts you know, a lot of pressure on, and I don't think that's an underestimation. Still, YuJing unluckily ends up on this side of the table. Just goes into the smoke, which the Shaolin have put in here. And thinking about this, looking at the orders available in Group 2, I decided I wanted to make a push down here, because if I was to destroy the Helot and also take out the Zulu Cobra Jammer by moving out around here and killing it, I would be willing to try and just trade the Rushi for a couple of orders. The YuJing for a couple of orders from the tag, and slowing him down and depleting his order pool that way. And removing the jammer is very, very important as well, because if he's still got that jammer by the end of the game, I'm not going to very easily be able to move into that objective room. That's for sure. So wanting to really take this on. Initially I'm having to move up to the boxes and shoot at these potential decoys here. It turns out that they really are just decoys, so I'm having to waste a bit of time shooting at them. I also want to reiterate that in my discussions about Helots, and I did talk about them recently in my video about what I would fix with the unit profiles, it's just unbelievable to me that Corvus Belli have a unit this cheap, that maybe they thought that it would be reasonably costed on paper, but given the lengths you have to go to avoid just being shot at by the real model when you're not expecting to, it really just exponentially boosts the power of this unit, and we're not joking about that. That's quite a serious issue. So YuJing does get to the spot where he wants to get to, and quite significantly, he moves into range of the real Helot, which can now fire at him, and unfortunately it's 2 dice on 14s, I think. And if I fire back at him with all shots, it'll be 3 dice on 16s. So the odds are in favor of the YuJing, but not massively. We also get a free combi shot coming our way from the Zulu Cobra, and that's actually something that I want. Because I've got 2 wounds, the combi rifle will either do 0 wounds or 1 wound. Either way, I'm fine. But if I can just kill the Helot, that will allow me to then shoot at the Zulu Cobra, who thought that he had a free shot, and then realizes he's broken himself out of camo and can die to my multi-rifle the following order. So I did feel like this is a good play. It is a bit of a risky play, but there's a pretty good chance of me pulling it off. And if we end the turn with the Zulu Cobra and the Helot both dead, and if the YuJing then ends up like behind this container, possibly even in suppression fire, it means that my opponent has to spend quite a lot of resources removing him, and the next couple of turns I can really extend that momentum and win the game. What actually happens is that the Helot wins the face-to-face roll with both dice, and the YuJing passes none of the armor saves and just burns to a crisp instantly. which is quite painful. I remember losing Shishkin in the same way, which was even worse. But this guy, there was a greater chance of that happening from the Helot, but it is painful. It's very frustrating when you lose that way. And this is a genuinely unlucky moment. But as we're going to see from turns later on in the game, there are a lot of other things that go my way in the game too that are lucky for me that help swing it back. But at the end of sort of this little interaction, I'm definitely losing. Like, I'm on the back foot, and I'm not the expected winner of this game after this little interaction. So here we are, LuXing, this angle, dies. But one small silver lining that we have achieved here is that the Zulu Cobra has been revealed. So looking to desperately salvage the situation, I'm using orders from Group 1 now to move up with my Guangxi, running through here, also coordinating an order so that other ones can move into better spots. The Dao Fei has used this coordinated order to stand up on the corner here, where he can be a useful ARO piece. Then we continue bringing in the Guangxi to a spot where he's out of sight of the jammer, but can then on the next order move through and take them both on. And what we want to do here is just completely ignore the rocket launcher, unlike previously, and just shoot at the Zulu Cobra with our pistol. He has to dodge, otherwise he'll take a chain rifle. So it's basically 2 free pistol shots against the dodge. Well, they're not really free. And might even get a second attempt at it if the Helot doesn't destroy the Guangxi here. So what happens is the Guangxi luckily does get the pistols through, so this is fortunate for me. It sort of makes up for a little bit of my bad luck earlier. But ultimately this is a very, very bad turn, because I've spent all my orders, I've killed one thing, which is just the Zulu Cobra. I haven't even killed the Helot. And I've already lost a couple of models, one of which is very, very significant. So really, really painful turn. However, now that, it's a day later and I've calmed down a bit and, we're not so involved in the game, it is possible for me to realize that a mistake can be corrected here. What I could have done, which would have made the situation less difficult for me, is that after the LuXing, said it right this time, had eliminated the first 2 decoys, what I could have done is actually attacked the Helot with my TR bot. So point of learning here, and what I could have done again is after the LuXing finds out that these guys are decoys and eliminates them, what I can then do is move out with the TR bot, who's in Group 1, fortunately, who's over this part of the battlefield and has a line directly through here to where the actual real Helot is, next to that white container. The TR bot has a much better chance of killing him with the help of assisted fire and the good range band and the Monstrucker to back him up if he dies. And that would have allowed me to then move the LuXing around here and take on, just this guy with the combi rifle. And that would have been much safer, much more reliable, probably would have caused me to destroy this guy without having to lose a Guangxi for it and end the turn with a LuXing in his territory. So that's a mistake. I didn't realize till later that I had a very easy line of fire to the Helot, but point of learning, it's sometimes it's on you, not just the dice. Okay, now moving back to where we were before, just consolidating positions, coordinated orders, blah blah blah. I do have a Liberto, which is in Group 1, so the Liberto is moving out through the middle of the table, trying to be discovered by basically the Tag and the Magister, and because he knows it's a Liberto. And eventually the Liberto does get discovered, but not before he's able to go prone. And the plan here is just to lay down a couple of mines to make it more difficult for Kendrat to go up through over the overpass, forcing her to take a different route. So expending both of these mines with the Liberto next to the stairway. So that's quite important. End of turn, terrible turn, but let's see if we can improve. Turn 1 for Pano, Magister moving out with Impetuous, Kendrat moving out, but not quite coming to line of sight of any mines, so that's good for her with that Impetuous move. We then have a coordinated order from Joan, and this is a significant one. Joan moving out towards the middle of the table and towards the objective room, the Magister moving around through here towards my side of the table that way, the Tag moving up with Climbing Plus and moving in this direction, and Kendrat will also be involved in this particular coordinated order. Let's slow down and talk about what my opponent's strategy is at this time of the game. He's used a command token already to deplete my order pool at the start, and he's going to be using command tokens and Joan's lieutenant order to basically attack me with Three things: the Tag and the Magister and Kendrat. My my little question or real suspicion about this play is that if it doesn't go very well, there's a danger of leaving, significant models exposed and in the middle of the table and in positions where I can more easily kill them. Whereas if he takes a very conservative approach here and just leaves the models back, it's going to make his final turn push that much easier. And remember, guys, turn 3, I'm going to be desperately leaving guys in the room. He's going to be able to open the doors, shoot some of the things in the room, and deliberately move into the room with basically the only models that he needs to move. He doesn't have to overpoint the room, whereas I do have to overpoint the room with the bodies of troops which are exposed. So a questionable thing about the strategy is, well, are you confident you're going to get a lot of damage or wipe things out, or are you going to go for the long approach, which is to be a bit more conservative, attack with maybe one thing and make the play at the end? That's an unresolved question. You guys might like to weigh in with your opinions, but the game goes on. Kendrat does take the lower approach here, and she's just sort of waiting at the edge of this corner. My opponent does not know what this camo marker is yet, but probably suspects it's something significant. We know it's a Daofei with an HMG, which is going to have a line through there. So she's a bit cautious about that to begin with, but eventually we are going to be moving in. Elsewhere, the Magister just taking up a spot behind this crate, but not coming right around it. He will have a great shot going through these two impetuous units right through here, but look, that's what they're there for. They're there to soak a bit of damage and blunt my opponent's attack a little bit. Tag also racing down this overpass walkway also. So Kendrat now does venture around through here. We know that we do have to fire at her with Mr. Daofei with the HMG. This is the best spot for him to do that. We don't really want to let her get too close, but the problem is with the total immunity and dogged, it's going to be hard to stop her from getting in range. Thing is, though, this guy's behind cover. He's got great physical, he's got decent armor, and there's a doctor nearby, so I'm feeling pretty confident and happy that I use this guy as a pretty well-placed ARO piece. The shot goes off, the HMG does connect with Kendrat and causes him a wound. Note that my opponent doesn't attempt to dodge, so kind of, expecting her to take some damage there, because he just keeps on moving with the second short skill. Alright, Tag well into position now, and we also have the Magister. So what he's really wanting to do at some point is get the Magister through and shotgun these guys. But the other part of the play is he's also going to be wanting to do a coordinated order at some stage as well, which can involve Kendrat on this side, the Magister here, and maybe the Tag as well. If all three of them go for the Daofei, that could be problematic, because we're talking a Panzerfaust, HMG round, Vulcan shotgun round. The Daofei really ultimately would have to dodge, and if I get really unlucky with that roll, the Daofei could be destroyed completely, not even leaving a corpse behind. Having said that, Daofei is physical 14 and definitely has a shot at surviving. Alright, here it is. So Kendrat is continuing to move forward. She is dogged, wanting to avoid the pistol over here as well. But Kendrat coming into a spot where she can start firing at the Daofei close range. Now this is pretty good for Kendrat because +6 to hit with 2 shots. But -3 cover, -3 for camo. So back to basic ballistic skill. The Daofei, on the other hand, is ballistic skill 13 and close range with a pistol. Much better to fire the pistol because it's more about blocking the Vulcan shotgun rounds from actually hitting home than it is doing further damage or getting to safety, for example. So pistol versus Vulcan shotgun, his 2 dice versus my 1. I do get a little bit lucky here winning the rolls, and not killing her, mind you, but my opponent definitely could have gotten a lot more damage here because the Vulcan shotgun is very scary. But I do have some pretty good odds to survive, and fortunately for me, the Daofei managed it and kept his head above water. Excuse me, that's actually not what happened. The very first interaction. Expecting to be up against the Vulcan shotgun, I decided to go with a pistol, and he ends up hitting me with the chest mines, which go off, but fortunately for me, the Daofei rolls very well with his armor 4 or 3 or whatever it is. I'm just going to go back and double check what it is. Armor 4. So he's got a shot at surviving chest mine saves, and it does manage to do so. So again, I was lucky in turn 1, but he's been unlucky in his turn 1, also failing to inflict the damage that he was perhaps expecting to. We then bring the Magister in, and the Magister is potentially able to go after these guys with such things as a shotgun or a Panzerfaust. I think initially what happens is that the Daofei shoots him, and he ignores the Daofei and fires a shotgun at the Shaolin Monk and the Guangxi. The Shaolin Monk's got a pretty good chance of avoiding this with the smoke grenade, but unfortunately the Knight has a pretty good roll with it, and blasts the Shaolin, gets a crit, kills him, and wounds the Guangxi, which, as we know, will kill him by the end of the turn, but at least he's there for the purposes of trying to stave off Kendrat. The HMG also goes off on the Magister, who takes a wound, but the beauty of the Magister is he's got 2 wounds. Another reason why I think he's more suited to this role than Kendrat is you just get a little bit more value for your points compared to what you can do with Kendrat in this context, is sort of how I feel about that. So turn kind of going okay, but he has cleared out these guys now. So what happens next is we do go for the coordinated order. And it does involve, I think, the tag once he comes down here. So the tags basically using Climbing Plus to come up the side of this building, take on the Guangxi, who I think manages to duck into safety. And then at this point, we have the coordinated order, where if I can just illustrate what's happening for you, if you imagine this room having a large wall along there which is infinitely high, the tag is basically coming from this side of the surface and on this sort of angle, and is just poking around the side of it so that he can get line of sight in this particular manner. So the tag is able to fire an HMG round at the Daofei, who's still there. Kendrat gets to fire a Vulcan shotgun from this angle, and as the Magister moves back into cover of this crate, can fire a Panzerfaust round here. So now this really got me worried, because the Daofei can definitely die here. But the Daofei got a nice round average roll, managed to get the dodge through, avoided the Panzerfaust and the Vulcan shotgun, and I think either tanked the armor save from the HMG or avoided that as well. Physical 14 is a good number. I mean, you can whiff it, you can roll low, your opponent can get crits, but there's also a reasonably solid chance of the Daofei surviving, and that's what happened. Thank goodness too, because my opponent this turn really putting me under a lot of pressure. But, you know, just like I would have been with my YuJing turn 1 as well. So, both of us having really underwhelming turn 1s. My opponent trying to take on my Doctor now, because he knows that if the Daofei goes down, the Doctor can revive it. Doctor actually having some really good luck here in avoiding that as well, either by the dodge or the past armor save against the HMG, managing to get back into cover here, into total cover. So another piece of good luck going my way, which I really appreciated. Okay, so now removing the tag, just bringing it back around, since he's very low in orders and just doesn't want to leave it out there on top of the building, because I do have a Rushi which is more than capable of taking the tag down. As he's doing that, the Daofei finally does lose a firefight, has to drop prone, having taken a wound, but that's okay. We're expecting that given the weight of fire throughout the turn. And tag, as one of the last things he's doing here, again, my opponent just demonstrating how high up he is. It's like more than 8 inches over here, above the clouds, shooting at my TR bot, and the TR bot actually manages to win the face-to-face roll. Note that it's 4 dice versus 4 dice, and the tag doesn't have cover against the TR bot, whereas the TR bot does have cover, so it's relatively even. We're talking about 11s versus 15s, 4 dice each, so the TR bot somehow manages to win, but doesn't cause any damage because the tag tanks it, and is able to use his failed guts check to come back around the other side of the building, where it will be okay. And that's around about where we leave it. So end of game round 1, nobody's even bothered to open the building, so nobody scores any points at the stage. I've had a very unlucky turn 1. My opponent has had a very unlucky turn 1. Is it even? Does that balance it out? I don't know. It's too technical. There are too many factors and dice involved with that. I felt very badly about my first turn, but my opponent surely felt quite badly about his because he was due more than that. but it's just one of these games where it's gone back and forward, and because we've both been unlucky, the game has stayed interesting. I think if one of us had suddenly gained a massive leg up there, this would devolve into a pretty one-sided game, but it hasn't so far. It's really up for grabs on either side. So, adding assisted fire to my Rushi, at some point we are poking out around the corner and taking on his Magister Knight, who didn't escape to safety. So there is a Magister Knight on top of the truck trailer here, who gets ripped up by our beautiful Rushi in the foreground. Successfully, we get a casualty. Then, the Guilang from Group 2, moving towards this pile of containers now that the Magister has been removed. We didn't want to move out with the Guilang first, because otherwise he might have dodged to safety and we would have missed our chance. Now, the beautiful thing about what the Guilang here can do is, thanks to his wonderful deployable repeater, which is one of the great reasons that you take Guilangs, puts the deployable repeater here. And the value of this is that potentially we can get the tag at some point. We may also be in range of Joan of Arc if she decides to do anything, although she's got stealth, she can leave the zone. But more importantly, it brings the repeater hacking range within a range of this door and this door. So later in the game, as my opponent enters the room, he may find himself hackable. My opponent pointed out that hacking area is not an infinitely high zone of control type thing. It's got a maximum vertical height of 8 inches. So given the tag is more than 8 inches up into the air, I wouldn't be able to hack his tag, which I felt was, you know, kind of cheesy. And we may as well address the issue right now that infinitely high walls does lead to some very awkward game scenarios, and we're not done with awkward game scenarios. There's going to be more of them in this particular match. It also makes it very difficult to actually physically mark out where the tag is and to determine line of sight, so that sort of does degrade the game a bit. It wasn't a matter of me sort of being on the receiving end of this. Me and my opponent both are agreed that this is not, you know, the most wonderful mechanic in infiNity, and there probably should be a height limit for this. Tell us what you think. Anyway, game continues. Guilang puts it down. Elsewhere, we're moving the TR bot just back a little bit behind the box, just anticipating his tag coming after it. While that's happening, we are going after the Helot. The Helot luckily passes an armor save and ducks back into cover against the TR bot, which was extremely annoying, and, you know, that may well have been what happened in turn 1 too if I'd been able to shoot at it. I could have just got unlucky at the Helot, but it still would have been worth me doing. Next, there's a coordinated order here. Assisted fire on this Rushi. There's a coordinated order that I want to accomplish here, where if I can basically use a coordinated order to move out here with the bot, reposition these guys, and have my Celestial Guard move just down to the edge of this and then move back with the rest of his order, I could use the second short skill to place a smoke grenade there, and the Rushi could actually attack the tag from this position, potentially killing it, and maybe even getting some shots off onto Joan of Arc as well, finally leaving the Rushi here in suppression fire, which would put me in a pretty good position. Sadly and unluckily, the smoke grenade fails to land, and I really am tight on orders this turn, so I can't simply keep re-attempting it. So sometimes, dice rolls like that, 14 or less, sometimes they can be significant, even though it's not like, one dice out of 5 or some sort of clutch situation. It can actually be quite meaningful to fail rolls like that. If you guys have played a lot of infiNity, I'm sure you'll understand. But this isn't an inconsequential roll. It is significant. Having said that, the Rushi moving forward and just taking a bit of a risk, a bit of a punt anyway, what we're wanting to do is get the Rushi to a position where she can actually attack the position of the Helot, who's still left himself a little bit exposed. So my opponent likes to do this a lot. He's quite sneaky. He likes to sort of keep the line of sight around to here. So where it previously had this line of sight, he's only pulled it back just far enough to get out of line of sight of the TR bot, but still maintaining this line down on the second arrow. So I'm going to attempt to come over here with the Rushi, but what was kind of annoying here is that after I'd spent a couple of orders on the Rushi moving out on the table, we then started to question whether the tag had seen me at that point, and that's not something we'd sort of discussed earlier to a very good extent, because the physical position of the tag way up here is a bit ambiguous. Now, this is not a dig into my opponent. It's not his fault. Like, he's not guilty of failing to declare something. This is just something we encountered. But look, I realized, look, if we're going to play it that way, if the tag definitely has line of sight, I may as well move in there and shoot it. Because I've got a decent shot at that. So the Rushi does come in and picks up this angle and does attack the tag, who will have no cover bonus up there. And this is a point in the game where I suddenly do get very lucky, and I have to be grateful for that and call it how it is. Sometimes I'm the guy being really badly unlucky and being salty, and sometimes it really does go in my favor, and this is a significant one because the tag just dies in one volley. This is his dice roll for the armor saves after taking 3 hits to the face, 5, 7, and a 1. So his tag is actually destroyed by the Rushi, giving me a pretty big advantage all of a sudden. We had a very funny discussion here, and this is a very comical moment, in that the tag is clinging to a wall 8 inches above Joan's head. One can easily imagine the tag having climbing plus, which is a rule which shuts down when you are unconscious and in a null state. And because you're using a climbing plus to attach yourself to the wall and that's not working anymore, surely he drops and falls, and given that he takes damage when he falls, he will die, and Joan of Arc is directly underneath him, so you'd think that the tag would fall and actually land on her head and destroy her, which we had a laugh about. We kind of talked over this and imagined how funny it would be if this was the game-ending move. The Tikbalang just gets his legs cut out under him, he loses his hands, falls to the floor, dies, kills Joan in the process. Hugely comical and cinematic. Now, of course, there's nothing in the actual rules that says that happens. In actual fact, although climbing plus shuts down, you can't launch yourself off the side of the building unless you're using the jump ability. It just doesn't work any other way. There's no rules in the game that describe what happens when you lose climbing plus on the side of a wall. There's also no rules in the game that describe jumping and landing on another model. It just doesn't happen, doesn't come up. So there's no way for Joan to take damage because there's no rules that say that she does take damage. So this is just a corpse of a Tikbalang that's still attached to the building, which kind of matters because he could go up there with a Monstrucker who also has climbing plus. And really a match made in heaven, the Monstrucker and tags that have climbing plus, really, because you can have your guy in midair and the engineer can go and revive you. Funny moment. Anyway, very, very lucky Rushi. Very grateful for that. I'm not always the unluckiest player on the planet. Sometimes I'm very lucky. So Rushi moves out here, does have a punt at Joan, and of course, just to punish me for gloating and celebrating my good luck, Joan just blasts it in the face and kills it. So as if I had sort of passed my threshold of being rewarded for good dice rolls, I'm slapped back down into the pit again, of course, with something which could have gone either way, but Joan of Arc kills the Rushi for free. Bam. Elsewhere, we have the Krakot standing up, the Dollface standing up again, and the Doctor wedged in between these two models, knowing that she may be needed to revive him. So my opponent has lost the ability to HMG me in the face. Joan's going to have a really hard time taking this guy on because he's going to outrange her. So this becomes a very important ARO piece at this stage. Monstrucker throwing up a mine with a drop bear for no reason, and then we go on to turn 2 for PanO. Now, of course, I'm not aware that he has a Sepulchre Knight, but as soon as the Warcore starts running towards me in turn 2, I'm kind of realizing what's actually happened here. So, Knight's heading towards me. I now know what it is as he's rushing towards me, because no Warcore would actually do this. He's repositioned his bot. Remember, this is a free coordinated order every turn due to inspiring leadership, so this bot gets a reposition. And we get to a point here where the Warcore, who is hackable, I found out, but is using stealth for some unknown reason, avoiding the repeater, but coming over to the spot here where he can now take me on. The Knight does have the opportunity now to attack the Dollface. So moving back behind here, but firing a Spitfire at the Dollface. Look, this is not terrible for me because, armor 4 or whatever it was, plus cover. You've got camouflage. He's pretty decent at shooting back anyway. Not necessarily going to die in a big pile of blood against the Knight. And we've got a Doctor next door, but the Knight does manage to dodge successfully. It actually turned out to be a crit dodge, but I would have been fine with a 10, 11, or a 12 or 13 or whatever, because that would have also won. So there you go. Dao Fei doing very well to survive. Tech B standing up and flash pulsing the Liberto for all it's worth. Not that that really matters. And then it comes to my final turn, turn 3, the most important game round. So this is a point where there's no more conserving orders. There's no conserving points in my deployment zone. It's really just a mad rush to get models closer to the objective room, which is still unopened. So no points scored throughout the game whatsoever, and I'm a little bit down on orders. So no reason to restrain the Krakot. He jumps over the side here. I wanted to do that just in case there was any opportunity for me to have him sit there as a useful ARO piece once the doors open, but he fell to his death and died, and Dogged didn't help him. This Krakot did have the metachemistry which identically matched Kendrat's one. It was Dogged plus total immunity, interestingly enough. Now, it's just imperative at this point in the game that I open the door. So the strategy here, and this was part of the plan all along, is to move the lieutenant down here and move the lieutenant round over here to open the door to the room, and do it with the lockpicking ability so that only the door closest to me is opened and the other 3 remain shut, forcing him to spend a few more orders opening them. And my opponent will be quite low on orders because he's lost a few more models now. One thing I didn't anticipate is that the Knight Sepulture is over here and just barely, fractionally had line of sight to the starting position of my lieutenant. So he goes for a free discover, and unfortunately for me does discover the Dao Fei. Sorry, not the Dao Fei, the YuJing. So that was kind of annoying. I believe I survived a shot from him as well, but can't remember the specifics. Fortunately though, after this little interaction where you can see the YuJing on the left and the Knight on the top right, we continue towards the room. I did point out here that if I got so unlucky that like the next 4 orders in a row all failed to open the room, it would be an automatic loss pretty much, because my opponent could, try the same thing and open the room. Luckily we did get the door open, and the YuJing does go inside the room, and because I've got a spare order in group 2 I don't need for anything else, we raid the Panoply. The Panoplies aren't going to make a massive difference, but it's still worth doing for 2 reasons. In a highly clutch situation where my opponent has no choice but to shoot into the room to kill the last model I leave in there but can't get anything in there himself, and nobody has the room at the end, I will win because of the Panoplies. Second reason, if the YuJing picks up something useful, I might be able to defend the room better, like armor would be nice for example. What he gets is actually a chain rifle and smoke grenades. Smoke grenades being an interesting one because it helps for defending, for dodging, also potentially blocking things going into the room. Chain rifle, not so much. I've got other things which can sort of achieve that. But yeah, probably not the best thing, all things considered, but the smoke grenades was definitely interesting. I probably would have preferred straight up armor though, because he's already got a boarding shotgun, which is likely to be what he's using for defense. We then have the Guilang, which was previously on the other side of this wall, moving through to the inner part of the objective room. So we now have 2 models in there, one of which is a camo marker, which can lay mines or uses combi rifle up close, so that's something. We can see what kind of position we're going to be in next turn though. Joan can move into the room, she's very expensive. The Knight can do that, she's very expensive. But I can hack them as they're trying to open the door. And only this guy can open the door, Joan can't do that. We now absolutely must get the Dao Fei in there because he's worth so many points and he's a decent fighter. So unfortunately I had to spend 2 orders getting to the side of the wall I needed to be in a non-prone state, and then climb down the wall and then walk through into the room. But once we finally expend all of our orders, we get him to a spot where Joan of Arc's on the other side of this door, and if he re-camos, Joan can't get through into the room without revealing him and killing him. And if he's left there as a corpse, Joan can't actually walk directly over his corpse, which is going to mean that he's going to have to get in through here. And the Knight, as it's trying to open the door, will be hackable. So even though I feel my opponent has a good chance of pulling this off because the final turn really is that powerful, I have taken some steps to try and stop him. As you guys can see, I've at least tried to lay out the defenses here, and we'll see how that goes. So we've got the Dao Fei on the left, wounded but in camo state, Guilang, Fort Observer, and the YuJing Hacker Lieutenant. And that's pretty much all I can get in there. I'm really out of orders, unfortunately, so not the best defense. But we do have a TR bot which can see into one of the doors, kind of partially. And there you have it. It's over to his turn. Sorry, actually what happens here is that the TR bot is moving with the last order from Group 1 to shoot at the knight, which is significant because best case scenario, the knight dies, which means that I would win the game because it's very unlikely he'd have enough orders to get the Monstracker over there, open the door in time, and kill the Dao Fei and get Joan into the room. So if this is just a TR bot shooting the knight and killing it, then that wins the game for me. I did actually damage him and get 1 wound on him, which is not insignificant. That actually will play a role in what eventually happens, but I did give myself a shot at actually claiming the game here, which was quite a good move. It didn't work though. He does take a wound, guts prone, back into total cover, and unfortunately slightly closer to the door than he was before, but still not in perfect range of it. I have a Monstrucker which moves up here, and although he's just got a long-range SMG, again, in a clutch situation where if Joan finds herself with just 1 wound left and has to move into the room, a single SMG AP round from long range, anything can happen, you know, roll a crit or something, she could die to this. So you've got to just give yourself every last little, you know, piece that can potentially attack. Even the Liberto standing up here, long range shotgun into her can make a difference. As I'm setting this up, of course, she shoots back at me. I just go for the dodge, and we're just waiting for that final game round. And look, really significant. I've done everything I can here. We've got Guangxi, which can kind of see near to the doors. This one's more significant because you can see through that door to this one. So as the knight comes into the room, I've at least got a long-range pistol shot. I've seen Guangxi pull off some really deadly stuff in the past, so there is that as well. Alright, so final turn of the game, Pano to act. We've got 5 orders plus the lieutenant order. Here we go. Sepulchre Knight moves to the door because he has to. And although he's got stealth, he's not going to be stealth while actioning the door opening, using the skill to open the door. So I can now hack him with my YuJing. This is a really important situation because I believe the knight is willpower 13. So let's just go back to it. Willpower 14. Cool. Hey, that's really good. You know, better than normal Pano whip. So willpower 14, good for him. Very high chance of opening the door. If for some reason he fails to open the door, he's going to get hacked all over again, and he's wasting orders. So there's a really significant chance of that not working. Just like in the last turn, how I said that if I repeatedly failed to open the door with my specialist, that would be lights out all over for YuJing. What does happen here is that the knight successfully opens the door on the first go. I do get a free hacking attempt which is successful, but he passes the BTS check. Going again back to the stats, BTS 6, so he's got a pretty good chance of not getting hacked. But I want you guys to appreciate how precarious this is and how easily the dice rolls can swing this kind of situation in one player's favor. If nothing works for me here and he just walks into the room and he's fine, I lose pretty convincingly. If he has any trouble opening the door or ends up failing BTS checks against my hacking, it becomes a pretty easy game for me to win, as I'm sure you guys can appreciate watching these pictures. So, what next? All of the doors are open now. What we want to see happen next is Joan of Arc moving through, and she's got a way of dealing with these two models. If she now moves through, and I'm just taking a bunch of different photos here, we're actually, what's happening right now is, in fact, the Dao Fei is being revealed as Joan moves through. This blue object here is her silhouette. So if I just jump back a couple of photos, whoops, there's Joan to begin with. An order spent on Joan, and now we're just positioning the silhouette here, and she's coming into line of sight of these two models, and using the height of the car to be able to see over the Dao Fei. And the situation here is that she has the option, if she wants to fire a nanopulsar through here, which will connect with me and the Dao Fei. If I attempt to hack her, it means that I could lose this model, which means that that's no points in the room. It could mean that I lose this guy as well if he's unlucky. And if that happens, then the knight just walks into the room, and if it survives against the Guilang, then that's it. Or Joan can do that. So I spent a fair bit of time thinking about what to do here. One option is to throw the smoke grenade. The problem with that is that although smoke grenades are nice and I picked them up from the panoply, the smoke grenade landing over here still means that the nanopulsar can go off and hit both models. The thinking behind the smoke grenade is that it basically stops Joan from getting into the room because she can't move through the camo marker of the Dao Fei, and the smoke grenade blocks her from actually revealing the Dao Fei, so it basically just completely stops her. She's stuck. That doesn't work though because the nanopulsar will automatically reveal the Dao Fei as it's fired through him. So I realized I couldn't do that. So the Dao Fei ends up pistoling her, I think. No, the Dao Fei goes for a dodge because I don't want him to die. That's really important. And the YuJing does go for the hack. And that's important because even if he launches a nanopulsar at that point, if I hack him, that's really going to slow him down and inconvenience him. And on BTS 3, I might survive the nanopulsar. So I decided to make that play. So if I recall correctly, it was a dodge from the Dao Fei and a hack from the YuJing. My opponent sees that happening and splits burst with his multi-rifle, 1 into the first guy, 2 into the second guy. And the dice managed to hold up for me all right. Things go really, really well here. And both models survive. Joan spends another order moving into close combat with the Dao Fei at this point. This is a good play by her because she's amazing in close combat, and the Dao Fei, despite his big rubber sword, is not very good in close combat. The saving grace for me, though, is that he's actually skimped out on that point. He's taken the cheap approach and invested, unfortunately and unwisely, in only an armor-piercing sword. Not a double-action sword this particular game, which is the fun thing. And it means that he can't kill the Dao Fei outright, and if he just leaves a corpse there, he's got to remove the corpse before moving into the room. What happens to me here is that the Dao Fei basically swings his sword in close combat, and Joan, rather than actually hacking me to pieces, opts just to fire her multi-rifle again. Which is the smart thing to do because you still need to contend with both of them. As she's moving through here, she's still getting hacked or taking that hack attempt from the hacker at the back, right? As she's doing this, the Liberto also fires at her for free through the forest, promptly rolls an 8, which is a crit. Now, again, it may seem like I'm very, very lucky here, but this crit has zero impact on the game. It doesn't affect any of the future orders. It just wounds her. It would have mattered if Joan comes into play later on with, 1 wound left or something like that, but this is just a minor annoyance, so we can sort of skip past this as being not very relevant. What has happened here, though, is that Joan's move through has failed to kill the Dao Fei, and has indeed managed to kill the hacker. So Joan's multi-rifle rounds at this point do destroy the YuJing. Dao Fei is still holding strong, and boy, we're talking about a really close game at this point. Like this is some pretty serious stuff here. My opponent really only has 2 or 3 orders left at the most, so he's now moving into the room with this knight here. And the thinking is that the knight, in fact, I might still have my hacker alive at this point. The knight's moving through and he's got a Spitfire. I'm actually choosing to reveal the YuJing at this point because I don't want him actually following up on this play. So what happens here is that the YuJing's trying to finish off the knight unsuccessfully, as it turns out. The knight's quite well armored. God, this is a brawl. This is such a tight game. The YuJing either dies the previous order or this particular order. I can't 100% remember. And the knight also fends off the long-range shot from the Guangxi, which, very nearly kills him. But with just 1 wound left, you can't really afford to get into a situation where the knight just loses in the face-to-face rolls and gets killed. Because it's going to take Joan a fair bit of time to just cut through the sky and walk into the room. But, of course, with this having happened, we can now move the knight into close combat with, I think, the second to last order. And the significance of this is that he can swing his sword into close combat, and unlike Joan, he does have a double-action close combat weapon. And if that completely removes the Dao Fei, Joan can walk into the room pretty much uncontested and win. So what has to happen here is that the YuJing has to fire the combi rifle into the knight before he enters combat, and the Guangxi has to fire his pistol, and they have to strip his last wound. and they have to either have the Dao Fei live or shoot Joan as she's entering the room, otherwise this is not going to work. So, what happens here is that the knight swings his blade into close combat with martial arts level 1, ignores all of the bullets coming towards him. He's willing to sacrifice his life. The YuJing swinging back for dear life with his CC 16 going down to a 13 or what have you. Unfortunately for me, one of the knight's rolls is a crit. It's probably about time he got something decent out of these attacks here. So I go to unconscious. I've got more armor saves that I need to make to keep the Dao Fei on the board. But I believe managing to fail that. No, in fact, I can't remember. We'll have to look at the next photo to determine this. But the important side of this is that at the same time I do need to remove the knight with either my Guilang or my Guangxi pistol. They both fired him and he does survive. So a little bit of good luck going back my opponent's way, but he's kind of due some because I've been very lucky with some of the other face-to-face rolls. This is the point where we call the game. It's a close but successful win there for PanOceania, because at this point the knight is more expensive than the Guilang and he doesn't need to spend any more orders. Even if the knight had died, Joan has an opportunity to get into the room somehow. My opponent suggested that he could jump over the corpse of the Dao Fei. There is a question about how high the doorway is. Is the doorway got an infinitely high door frame? I don't know, but we didn't have to answer that question because Joan didn't need to do that. I did point out that the Intel com card in this mission, even though I hate that game mechanic, technically I can add a 17-point bonus to the points cost of my Guilang, but even that bonus on top of the Guilang's own points will not make it more expensive than the knight. So look, well played to PanOceania. It was a tight game. It was an extremely fun game. My opponent played pretty well, and the outcome was a PanOceania win. Let's take some time now to reflect on what went down this game and what it was all about. I am confident in saying that this wasn't a game that was just decided by some wacky dice rolls. The dice went back and forward, and in this last clutch, had the dice been a bit more, had there been more variation in the extremes of the dice rolls, it could have been decisively one way or the other in this last turn. If he had flubbed a bunch of stuff getting into the room and I got hacking off, this would have been a pretty secure win for YuJing. But that's sort of what made it fun. Also, if I hadn't held out for so long, he could have easily stomped me much earlier than he did, and it would have been less sweat off the brow. So let's just acknowledge that. Game round one, terrible for both of us, so we're kind of even there, but let's talk a bit more about the decisions, since I think that's more important to you guys watching than the luck side of it. My decision and the plays that I made with the YuJing, I don't regret them at all. I think that I had an opportunity to inflict some really meaningful damage and put my YuJing in a position where it was really going to be good. My decision not to infiltrate with the Dao Fei, also good, because he was in a great defensive position during that time, and he set himself up well for entering the room. I was happy with how that worked out. My biggest tactical mistake, I think, was missing the opportunity to shoot at his Helot with my TR bot turn 1 before the YuJing engaged his Zulu Cobra. That's one thing I could have done better, and one takeaway I could go into the next game. Just got a phone call here. We'll call you back. As you guys can tell, I only do these videos in one take. The other mistake, of course, is deciding not to go for a second turn. My opponent explained to me that what he could have achieved is just climbing the tag to the top of the building pretty much, walking it around and killing everything in my deployment zone. And I don't really like that way of thinking because, number one, it's assuming that I wouldn't have been more defensive with my deployment. I think I could have gotten away from that. But secondarily, if it's really possible to do that, I'm screwed either way against that stupid game mechanic, so I'd rather not sort of be philosophical about what can be achieved there. In a normal game, I'm pretty sure you can play against this kind of Pano list, deploy well enough, and defend well enough to win a game more comfortably going second. His jammer could have been a problem. If he had basically taken his last turn, moving all the knights into the room, having the tag nearby, the jammer at the back, that would have been hard for me to crack, but I still would have had a couple of turns before that, to wear him down. Alright, I've got to call that person back. Hope you guys enjoyed this bat rep. I really enjoyed casting it and taking it to you and playing this game, and hopefully we'll have some more YuJing Pano action in the future. See you again next time, guys.